welcome back to the podcast Just A Convo. I am your host Jonathan Fors, and this is episode 15 with Natsune Oki. And believe me when I say this is a very motivational and truly inspiring, to be honest, conversation that I had with Natsune. And so enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you next time. With a world filled with the noise of the pandemic, natural disasters and personal depressions, Natsune Oki brings a bright light in a sometimes far too dark world. She's the host of Life Up Education TV, managing director of Foreign Connect, and most recently the author of the Game of Self-Domination. She speaks about overcoming the personal negativity and achieving lifelong success. And today she's here on Just a Convo to share her thoughts. And so welcome.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for having me.
Of course. And it's always funny when doing research on every single guest. I make up my mind on and make up my own idea of who the person is, but I'm always curious to know, who would you say that you are?
Who do I say I am? I would say it might come out sounding so cliche also, but I would say I want to spread love and positivity.
Yeah.
And I want to make a quick difference for something that happened very recently for me. So the last few days, actually, I got super obsessed with Criminal Minds. Do you know the American TV series?
I do. I haven't watched it, but I know it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if you watched any other like a criminal-related TV series from America, but Criminal Minds is one of those series, right? And some of these murders you see on these shows, like they are crazy, like really crazy. And, you know, when I preach about, you know, being positive, having the right kind of mindset, managing your mind, like consciously, right? Like it actually matters. Like the alternative world is that like this criminals happen because of the lack of love, because of lack of empathy, because of lack of managing your mind, right? So it was like exactly the opposite of everything I preach in my Life Up Education TV. So for me, you know, even if the impact might be small, I would still want to try my hardest to give the love, unconditional love to the world, and really encourage people to teach each other with empathy, less egoistic, more humanity. And I think that can, even by small, like make a good impact. You know?
Yeah, and I think that says a lot about you, because every time I ask this, I usually start every single interview with the same question: who are you? Because I always get a different answer. Some people choose to talk about their professional life, and some people like to talk about who they are inside, personality-wise, and some people do their family life. And so it's very different, and it's always interesting to hear what you decide to say. And before we get into all the good stuff, from personal curiosity, I want to know, you grew up in Japan, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. And I want to know, have you been to other countries as well, in Europe or America and
yes,
and the such?
I have lived in America for many years, I would say, and I have traveled to Europe as well. As far as the continent goes, Europe, America, Canada, that's about it. Oh, Hong Kong, so China.
Okay, right. And do you notice a big cultural difference in, I mean, obviously there is a big difference, but do you prefer, or do you have a preference where you want to live?
Definitely America, to be honest. I think
Really?
my personality matches the most with American people versus Japanese people. But yeah, each place has its own pros and cons, you know? But in terms of, personality, I think definitely America.
How do you mean by personality?
American people are more Peter Pan than Japanese people. And by that, I mean, people are more dreamy. And I think the country itself has this tendency of giving people second chance. So the way they look at failure versus the way people here, Japanese people look at failure is significantly different, I must say, because Japan has such a heavy weight in failure. Like we take everything so seriously. So when you fail, the level of shame is like not comparable with American society, I would say. Like people would make you feel ashamed of your failure, and that makes people less courageous to take actions, I feel like. So if you're entrepreneur, bottom line is, if you're entrepreneur, this society could be harder to navigate through as an entrepreneur. But in the at the same token, because you're so unique, if you're like entrepreneur and in Japanese society, like because you're so unique, it could also work in advance.
Right. And the judgment you speak of, is it from like society in general, or is it more family and such?
I think society in general. And then once again, of course, you know, everything has pros and cons, right? So by us having that characteristic, one of the, I guess, downside of it is that, you know, heavy judgment, but also the other side of it is we are more patient. I think people are more patient. People are more practical, like less dreamy, more practical, more patient. So, you know, it has a good thing to do. It has something good of it too. Like, for example, let me tell you one story real quick.
Right.
Like the other day, I found out that like a lot of businesses, the lifespan of American companies are very short compared to Japanese companies, for example. Like there's even a company that lasts over 1,000 years in Japan.
Oh, God.
Like it's crazy. So, you know, it has pros and cons. I think each characteristic we have as a nation has pros and cons.
Yeah, of course.
So the Americans speak,
Have you experienced this in your own life as well? The negativity and the judgment? Because you're obviously an entrepreneur.
Right. Judgment-wise, I think so, heavily, because I almost got kicked out from my high school. And, you know, the first time I thought, you know, for a long time, I didn't know how to interpret that. I thought it was just I was looking at the label of people telling me I'm a failure, right? Almost failing the high school. But now I think of it, I definitely recognize it as my first sign of me being me, like someone who wasn't afraid of being different, someone who was curious and followed the curiosity over insecurity, I guess. So I think that was, one of the critical moments that also shaped who I am today.
Right. And did you have some kind of support system, like parents or loved ones or friends that kind of supported you through this transition and journey, or has it always been you?
I think, I don't know if supporting is the right word in terms of like, they didn't encourage me to be me, but they were trying to fix me. Right, like fix me.
Right.
So I have such a like deep love for my parents because they literally gave me everything that they had. But and the same token, I feel like during that time, they didn't necessarily encourage me to be me, but they wanted to make sure that I become normal.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a supporting. I don't know how to describe, but I also understand that they did it because they loved me, you know?
Yeah, I think it's about, like you say, I think they're supporting you in the way that they know how to support. I mean, I obviously I don't know anything about your family or parents, but from like listening to you now and hearing other people speak about the same things, I think there's obviously a big difference between generations, of course, how different generations work, and from the year 2000 and forward, and a bit earlier too, there's a lot of entrepreneurialism, I guess, and people want to dream bigger and achieve bigger things, and we don't necessarily want to go to this university, get a degree, and get a boring ass job somewhere and just be settled for life. We want to explore different ways, and that kind of conflicts or creates a conflict, I think, between certain generations and certain individuals. And that's kind of what you said about fixing you, kind of conforming you and putting you into the box that they know work. While in reality, it's a new time and it's a new generation.
Right. And like you said, especially when you have that either entrepreneurial tendency, or if you are an entrepreneur, like, it's actually, personally, I want to recommend people not to listen to parents. I want to recommend people not to listen to school, not listen to teachers, because I mean, when you are in a market, there's no rule. And if you do everything that people do, you're going to lose. Like, you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to have the brain to think differently. You have to also be bold. You have to be courageous, because you're literally, like, you're most likely to be the first in the line, right? Like, when you're an entrepreneur. So you have to be comfortable with that comfortability. So I think that period definitely gave me the test for me to have that uncomfortability, you know? And I think my dad definitely, though, my dad's side, because he's entrepreneur too, he was more chill. Like, he didn't worry too much. He was like, like, don't try to make your mom worry. Like, you know, you're gonna be fine, but like, don't try to make your mom worry. And my mom was more like, oh my God, like, what the fuck are you doing? Right? Like, so I think it makes sense. Like, it's entrepreneurship thing, I think.
Yeah, it does. Like, it does. Yeah. And you have to, like you said, you have to be willing to take the risks and don't listen to, like you also said, to parents or whoever is taking care of you at an early age. And that's a difficult, or can be a difficult task, especially if you are very close with your parents and you usually tend to listen to your parents in a lot of aspects and a lot of different topics. But then it comes to your own dreams and what is it called? Realizing your own potential. And then you have these people that you love very much and they love you very much back, but they're telling you to not do this thing that you really, really want to do. And that's a very difficult relation to have. And and you have to be comfortable to not listen sometimes. Right.
And I think I want to say two different things of that. The first one is, this is why the market is the judger. Like, this is why someone's subjective opinion doesn't decide your destiny. This is why, if you can, regardless of the disagreement you get from the people who you love, like, regardless of the people you look up to, like parents, like, regardless of you get critics and rejections from these people, if you can finally end up in a place where you keep coming back to your entrepreneurial side of the story, you standing up for your own story, you standing up to try to make your own story, like, regardless of how many times you fail, like, this is success, right? Like, this should be the definition of success. Like, things shouldn't be easy. Like, if you want to be entrepreneur, and if you are entrepreneur, you will end up entrepreneur, right? And then I think that's how it should be. Like, the market is the final judger. Like, everything should happen. Like, your parents' disagreement, your parents' discouragement, everything should happen. What can you do regardless of these things? Because life is not about how it should be. Life is just about how it is. Yeah. And the one who can navigate through that should be the winner. Like, there shouldn't be fair game. Like, the life should be how it is. And then if you can win in that environment, then you're truly not burnable. Like, you're truly capable, right? And then that's what I want to say. And then also the second thing is, you know, socialization. Like, at some level, I did question it a little bit. And this is something I talk about in my book also, right? Socialization. And essentially, that's the rules. Like, that's how, you know, from the accumulation of the history, everything, like, we made this rule in order for us to survive in order for us to coexist to one another. And there are times, I think, like you said, you need to challenge that, but everything is balanced. Like I've been saying, I think everything is balanced. So you don't have to question things that's working, you know? Like you also need to understand when to question and when to just follow. And sorry, it's just I'm just
no,
trying
of
to wrap it
course,
up.
of course.
But this is I thought about this because, you know, the last couple of days, like I said, I've been watching the justice related drama, right? Like the Criminal Minds, and a lot of, like, for example, a lot of the example of like a lot of these people are apparently like psychopaths. And I actually, you know, searched for the definition or what kind of people these people are. And, you know, these people like to break rules for the sake of breaking rules and for the sake of like having the control, right? And things like in that nature. And I think, so in that degree, like for the sake of keeping the society safe place, I think, like I said, like there are places where you can question the system, the rules, but also you should always question, come up with a question, predicate it, but your default thinking should be always like not wanting to hurt others, and having that empathy, right? Like, and then that puts you in a state of, I don't want to hurt people, right? Not necessarily by when you are making the decision. So that's another thing I needed to say, because there's a line with the selfishness. And then when it comes to the line where you're selfish or your ego becomes so big that you are actually hurting someone else's free will, then that's another story, you know?
Yeah, of course, that's a topic in itself. And going back a little bit, you touched on a really great point, to me at least, how we need to redefine success. And success isn't necessarily, I was going to say succeeding, but creating a super wealthy company where you make millions. I mean, that's definitely success in one way, but success can also be starting 10 companies and completely failing all of them. That's success, because each and every single time you have learned something and you have done something that you want to do and you hopefully enjoyed it. And why is that not success? Why is no one calling that success? That's the bigger question that we all need to ask. And
I agree. And there's something I want to say about that then. Can I tell you a story?
Of course.
So the other day I was scrolling through my TikTok, and there was a woman, I think she's some sort of like a Miss Universe woman or whatever. And she was saying like, you are brilliant, you are beautiful, you are smart, you're sexy, whatever. And I was like, wait, but what if I'm not, right? Because in reality, there are people who are not. Like, there are, like, I don't know if I'm smart. I don't know if I'm, like, sexy. I don't know if I'm pretty. Like, I don't know, right? And then, then what does that mean? Like, does that mean that I'm a failure? Does that mean that I don't have the permission to love myself? Like, fuck no. Like, and I think this is the generational thing too. Like, millennial and the generation below us are often told, like, this soft, right, like a protection, like we were told, like, oh, it's okay, you're beautiful, you don't have to work for anything, like you're amazing as you are. This is an amazing thing to say, but it could be very misleading. It could actually encourage you to create a bigger insecurity, because some people are not these things. And it shouldn't mean that, it shouldn't send, this kind of message shouldn't send a message that you shouldn't love yourself if you are not fitting these criteria. Like, if you're a failure, like if you are failing right now, you shouldn't love yourself. Like that's what the message is, right? Like the bottom line. But it shouldn't be like that. Like you should always have the courage to have a unconditional love toward yourself. So, you know, regardless of if you're not smart, even if you don't have the school degree, even if you're not sexy, even if you're not beautiful, even if you're not like whatever, like you should always love yourself. And then when you can have the courage, you're at the first, like, start line, because now you're not at the scarcity in your mind. You can start from abundance. And that's what I usually want to promote.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's about, we need to stop putting labels on it. We, instead of saying, oh, you're beautiful, you're so smart, you're sexy, or whatever, you should just say you're you and I am me, and that's all there is to it. Because in the end, that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, it's so subjective. Like everything else is so subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, sure, everyone has their own thoughts and beliefs about other people in their surroundings, but they're their personal beliefs about other people. And you have your beliefs about me, I have your beliefs about you, and you have your own beliefs about yourself, and vice versa. And that's all there is to it, really. Yeah. It's a side note, but before we get too deep into all that, you have a what I would call a big success, because you have published a book, which is called The Game of Self-Domination, and I want to know what is the essence of it? What is it about?
The Game of Self-Domination is about how one can create mental transformation in 3 different phases. The first phase, I talk about how can you make a commitment in life. And this phase, you don't have to have any space for logical thinking. You don't have to have any space for anything else but emotion. You need to build up strong enough emotion. And I call it with like 2 different emotions. One is desperation, and then second one is inspiration, and your inspiration needs to exceed your desperation. So that's the first phase. All I talk about is building up your emotions. So I focus on that. And then the second phase, here comes more difficult phase, because it becomes actual perseverance in committing to a plan. And this is the phase a lot of people fail, right? And you know, when it comes to perseverance, it requires you to have more more different thinkings, like including emotional thinking, but also logical thinking, also humility, like also understanding that like you don't mean anything. Like honestly, so that's the second phase I talk about. And then the third phase I talk about is what is success, what is happiness. And you know, up until this point, we've been talking a lot about let's redefine failure, because the chances are you're facing a lot of failures while you're in a journey. But now let's focus on really understanding what happiness should mean to us. So that's what I talk about in the third phase. And then, so that's the whole book.
Right.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Plenty of them. And let me readjust here. And perseverance is a big one. Each and every single one who wants to create or achieve anything have to have a perseverance in some way or another.
Yes.
And you...
So I can give you a little bit more because it was really quick. But basically in this phase, I also talk about the importance of self-awareness, and also how the perception is the reality. And then I'm gonna show you how you can create perception that sets you up for success. And then I also discuss about this method that I developed. One of the thing about me is I come from business background. I studied economics and business, but also I'm a very human oriented person. Like I love people. And so when I mix them together, I actually have this eye of looking at everything with a business perspective. And then basically I came up with this method. I call it Life Up Method. And then where I talked about how I combined 5 different business concepts into life strategy. So you can actually use it to achieve the maximum results with the maximum results, the most effectively and efficiently. And then these business strategies came from actual economists and businesses. But I combined it into the life strategy. And then another thing I talk about is also vision, the importance of vision. And then we'll also break your vision into goals to make more practical. We also talk about risk tolerance, how you can I guess, manage your failures or risks of the failures, how you can diversify risks, things in that nature.
Yeah, and I think what most people struggle with when starting any business or trying to create anything that may make you money, in my eyes, there's two kinds of people. There's either the business kind of person, and then there's the creative kind of person. And you're most commonly not both of them. You're either one of them. And so, from my understanding, it seems like you have both, which is, I think, very rare. And I think it's truly a gift you have, because then you have the best of both sides.
Right.
And so instead,
I do have to. I guess I would feel guilty if I did to slide like that. I think I'm definitely more artsy person. I think I'm definitely more creative person. But because I trained my logical side of the brain, I also understand the language of them. But I think I'm a big vision guy, big vision person. And this is actually interesting because, when I speak about the mission of Life Up Education TV, there's something I talk about, which is I want to create contribution to the humanity. And I talk about it from the perspective of art and science. And what I mean by that is, when you think about art, it's creativity, imagination, and also the capability that humans have that distinguish us from all the animals, right? Because we're able to imagine what is not there yet, right? Like we're able to see it.
Right.
Our creativity already exists inside of us. And that is why the art, the creativity is the foundation of the humanity. And when you think about creativity, you think about future, because future is not there yet, right? Like the imagination is not there yet. And that's why future is already inside of us. What we need to do to get to future is to unlock us, our humanity, our capability as a humanity, right? And then for us to do that, we also need to look at the history. The opposite of the future is history. And history is data. History is experience and knowledge and experience and knowledge and wisdom that we already acquired from the accumulation of the evolution of humanity, right? So our ambition for art became more and more sophisticated as we acquired more knowledge and experience and data points from our historical data or experience. And then now, for us to achieve this ambition of art, I guess we need the inspiration, because inspiration is what drives us to the future. And then, so sorry, I think I kind of went a little bit off road, but back to your point was that, because the science is more like practicality, right? Science is what we do in everyday basis, like, and data we extract from the experience, versus art or the inspiration comes internally from inside of what drives us, what motivates us, what makes us move, right? And I feel like because I understand the daily operation, the practicality of daily operation from business thinking, but in the same degree, I also pull from the very big vision person. Like coming back to your point, I guess I can pull from the two opposite directions to come to the optimal point.
Yeah, and that having those 2 points and putting them together is because personally I'm a very creative person. I like doing things. I like doing practical things, and it can be I've done all the way from like photography to graphic design to podcasting right now, and all kinds of different things, and I love doing all of it.
Yeah.
But whenever I want to take the next step and try to make it an income, that's when I struggle. That's when I really struggle. I mean, I know the actual, because I have studied a little bit of marketing and PR. so I do have that understanding of how to actually go about to market something, but the actual business side of filing taxes and like all those theoretical boring things,
Right.
that's when I really struggle. And having
Yeah.
that, like you have, since you do have an education in business, right?
Uh-huh.
That's a real asset, and I think more people, both creative people should get more of the business side, and the business people should get more of the creative side. And
Right.
but I don't know how we can actually go about to putting a bridge between the gap, or in the gap. Do you? I guess it's a spontaneous question, but do you have any, I guess, idea on how we can bridge the gap?
I think I don't think people should focus on what they're not good at. I'm a big advocate. So this is one of the concepts that I mentioned from Economist, a very famous one, David Ricardo. He had this idea about international trade, where he theoretically proved that the country produces more products when they focus on what they're good at making. So overall, people can have more products instead of one country trying to produce. So if there are two products, and then there's two countries, let's say, right? Instead of two countries trying to produce two products separately, his theory is one country should focus on producing a product that they're good at. Another one do the same thing, and then exchange, right? Like international trade.
Right.
And then he would theoretically prove why that is more efficient. And then this is something I talk about in my book. But so the same concept apply. I think, companies should have a division. Like you should focus on, hopefully if you are capable of funding yourself, like you should always try to hire someone else to do the things you don't want to do and you are not good at doing. And that way you have the very same energy you can spend on the things you're good at, and then you can maximize your results. And that's just my one person's opinion, but that's how I look at it. So I never try to focus on doing better at what I'm suck at, what I'm not good at. Right. If I don't enjoy it, especially, I'm like, fuck it, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Yeah.
And the time moves too quickly. Getting back to the point and the topic, I want to know, when did you, because you wrote the book and it's published, but what made you write it, and what is the reason behind actually going about writing it?
Yeah, so I didn't write a book to write a book. I never thought about, okay, I want to write a book. It wasn't my intention. I think there comes my practicality side of a person, understanding how business work, logical thinking. My intent was I genuinely wanted to make a guide or something that benefits people, as well as for me, as for myself as well. But I wanted to make something to basically spread the positive message, encouraging people. That was my actual intent, deepest intent. And I can also come back to the book years from now, also using it for myself too, right? So that was the ideal. And then, the practicality part is just that because I knew that I wanted to make Life Up Education TV, and, in logical thinking, people consume content in a different forms. Some people like to watch, some people like to listen, some people like to read. People consume it, learn different materials from different senses, right? So for me, it was just practical that I make content in video, I make content in a book, I make content in podcast, I make content in social media. I have to be just everywhere, wherever I can reach the audience. Right. And that was it.
Yeah. And would you say it's, you touched on that you want to bring it to the world, but would you say a large reason is also for you to get something out of yourself, to get I guess, kind of write down your thoughts and your beliefs. Would you say that's a big reason too?
I don't think that was the first reason. But yeah, definitely I did want to write something so that I can refer back to it for myself as well. But yeah, no, the biggest reason was that I wanted to make Life Up Education TV, and I needed to be in every form possible for me to push that.
Right. And writing a book, and especially publishing a book, is a big task. There's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never written a book or know anything about how to do it, but I know there's a lot of work involved.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, you're completely self-published. Am I right? Right.
Yeah.
How is that?
I think, it's just writing part is a lot of work, like you said. It took me solid 5-6 months to perfect it. And good that it happened during the Corona time too.
Right.
And after that, it was very easy process, I would say. I hired people to do the editing and proofreading, stuff like this. But it was fairly not so complex, I think, process. Yeah.
Okay, that's surprising to hear. I thought it was going to be this.
No, I mean, yeah, definitely took work in terms of writing. I didn't use any ghostwriter, so it was a lot of writing.
Yeah. I was expecting this long, dreadful story of, oh, it was horrible, but it's finally done. But you enjoyed it?
I actually enjoyed it a lot because it made me thinking a lot, and I think I have always been good at writing. It's funny. I guess one of the funniest thing about this is that, when I tell my friends I wrote a book in Japan, and Japanese people would expect, oh yeah, you wrote it in Japanese, right? And then I said, no, in English. And it's so funny because my native language is in Japanese, but I still prefer to write it in English.
Right.
It's crazy, but people get surprised when I tell them.
Yeah, is it very not close-minded, that's the wrong word, but is it very do people expect that you focus on and prioritize the Japanese audience in a way? Does it make sense? Yeah,
well, it's just that they would assume that I would be more capable and comfortable writing in my own language, right? So that's where the surprise happened, I think.
Okay.
So it actually makes me feel bad a little bit too, because my parents especially, they wanted to read it right away, but they can't read it,
Okay, they don't know English.
Yeah, one of them one of them know, but not so high level. So this is too difficult.
Right, that's a shame. You have to translate it for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and jumping from one thing to another, in your book, in your what's it called? Summarization of the book.
Yeah,
you mentioned something. Yeah, you mentioned something called identity circle. I want to know more about that. Can you elaborate a bit?
I think this is too short of a time to completely give you the description of it, but I'll give you a short version of it. So basically, Aristotle, he says happiness is virtue activity of the soul. So your virtues are tested in your life, and so basically, in another word, any way you go in your life, you would have pains. So it's just a matter of choosing the pain that you like to have, choosing the pain that puts you in the right direction of the growth. So that's basically the idea of Aristotle's, right? So expanding on that idea, I wanted to understand what does that mean? And I took another idea from this Japanese philosophy. We call it Ikigai, which stands for reason of being. And there are different circles explaining different things. So for example, one circle would tell you like what you love, what you believe, and what you can make money at, like what you're good at, right? Like there are different circles. And then Ikigai basically tells you to pick the one that overlaps all the circles. But here comes my business thinking. It makes more sense if you diversify. And then that's something I can tell you in the book. But basically in this identity circle, I give you this framework so that you can look at different criteria, like I told you, and then really come up with who you are, right? Like looking at those framework and then really understanding what you want in your life. And I call it identity circle.
Right. But in a more concrete way, how do you in your own life identify these circles and these different things and then choose the right ones?
Right. And for me, it's very like, not only for me, but for everyone, it's very like emotional process, emotional decision-making process rather than like logical process.
Right.
So, I mean, there are two phases to this. One phase, I make you write down the emotion part. And then after that, we'll break it down to practical sense. We'll actually come up with what that means, right? Like tangibly. So in the second phase, it's a lot more about like the first phase is a lot more about emotions, like more indefinitive. And then the second phase, we actually try to put meaning to it. Whether that's a job title, whether that's quantifying something in terms of like income, in terms of whatever, right? So to your question, I guess for me, when I did this exercise, it was more like, so what do I want? What does that mean, right? Like the slow transition of like translating what I want into like what it is that I need to get that. Right. And then that gives me clarity of where I'm going into direction to this day even, right? Like when I first did this exercise, it was actually more than a year ago. And then so basically coming back to earlier question actually you asked me, one other thing I did was I already had this set of exercise that I did to myself. And it's been working, it worked. I showed it to people because it was kind of sophisticated, but also very like insightful and helpful. A lot of people told me I should write it down on a book. And that's how I kind of like came up with the idea of book first. But also I wanted to make a Life Up Education TV. But these were like two primary motivators that I did it. But basically to back to your question, like I already did the exercise like times ago, and that's how I came about it.
Right. And now over a year later, like you said, do you have this clarity now, would you say, or is it still blurry?
No, I mean, of course I do have clarity, but I think gradually, like it was a process. Definitely, like first process was like I didn't have it, so I had to like be very practical, very specific, very definite of what it is. But over time, as you are pursuing your entrepreneurial journey and everything, like you kind of like get better sense of it more and more. So for example, if you speak about business too, like what is required in the startup phase versus like maturing phase versus like managing phase versus like exiting phase, like everything, right? Like what's required in different phases is different. And then the life is the same way. I feel like I feel like I'm more clear about the direction that I'm going. I don't have to do the exercise as often as I did before, but now I have a lot more clarification than those times when I first try to start like getting the clarity. I still do some like daily things, but yeah. And so from my understanding, there's a lot of need to understand your own emotions, and
I think that's definitely very true. And in order to
self-awareness.
know, and in order to know what you really want to do and to make the right decisions for yourself, you need to understand and be able to handle and to understand your own emotions.
Yeah.
And
I have to ask you one more thing. I think the big part of the self-awareness that I talk about is quantifying. Like the big part of it is practicality. Like I said, like I will break it down into more realistic terms. And that's what a lot of people fail. I think a lot of people try to think what they want, but in reality, they don't analyze it. But in my book, I ask you different questions to analyze what that means, and then really make you come down to practical terms of what it is that you want.
Right. And have you always, because you obviously understand these things since you have written a book about it.
Yeah.
And so have you always been this in touch with your own emotions, or has it been a process?
Yeah, I think it's definitely has been a process, and me being crazy has definitely helped. But me being crazy as in like I always had this courage to follow my intuition over my logical thinking, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Like because I was such a emotional driven person. I was very bold, right? Like I would do things that I felt right. And because I was that, I was pretty vulnerable to risks and failures, right? And now I'm glad that I was that way, because I think me having to go through different failures that I made myself, I think puts me into do unique things, unique experience, and then definitely gave me different insights to come to the point that I am today.
That's amazing to hear. And sort of looking at the time flies. But to wrap it all up,
yes.
How can a person go about getting more in touch with their own emotions and realizing these things? And I'm sure your book will obviously help. But without reading the book right now, how would you say that the person can start getting more in touch?
Well, first you gotta definitely want it, right? And after that, I think you have to stop BSing. Like you have to have the courage to completely be vulnerable. Like self-love, like ultimate self-love, like stop bullshitting, like stop pretending someone you're not. And like really, and like if you are losing right now, like admit it, you're losing. And what? Like that doesn't change you. Like that doesn't change how valuable you are. You can be valuable. Like if you think you're valuable, you're valuable. That's it. Like don't anyone tell you the otherwise. I mean, people can tell you that, but don't believe it. Like you are full control. And when you really accept this fact, like no bullshit approach, I think you can gain the ultimate courage to just accept yourself, and then that's your start line. Like you can actually dream from that point, because you stop listening to what other people say. And entrepreneurship, like it's not fun. I mean, like entrepreneurship, like it's not about the trophies. Like often it's about the dirt. Entrepreneurship is about being broke. Entrepreneurship is about eating shit. Entrepreneurship is about working in the dirt, right?
100%.
That's it. Like that's okay, because you're living for the journey.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, sorry, just to wrap it up, I think people are scared, like they're insecure about what people think, and then they're lying to themselves, right? Like they want to be seen successful than actually striving for success. So I think that's the first thing I would say is stop bullshitting and really recognize for what it is and who you are, what you want, and be willing to accept any challenges that's gonna come against you. But if you choose the path that makes you truly happy, like all challenges all of a sudden becomes more adorable. Like all the challenges are not hardships. Like it actually grows you. Like it actually makes you happy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And your point on entrepreneurship, I think right now in the world we're living in, everybody speaks how, oh, you should be an entrepreneur. Start a Shopify store and start dropping some random shit and you'll become rich. And it's super quick and easy. You'll do it in a week. And just that's just not how it works. And even though we live in an age where starting a business is easier than ever before, it's still a lot of hard work. It's just because it's easier doesn't mean that it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, by all means, I think people should fail. Like by all means, people should try it. Like, and then, like I said, the market is the judger, which means that if you are truly entrepreneurial, like if you're a true like winner, even if you fail like so bad, you would come back like stronger and better. So by all means, people should fail on their faces.
Definitely, I agree with you 100%. And once again, I feel like we could continue this conversation for another hour. There's so many things to touch on. But being the format that it is, we do have to end it. But before we do that, where can people get in touch with you?
Yes, I'm Natsune Oki, the author of the Game of Self-Domination. You can find me on my website, Life Up Education TV. The book is available there, and you can also find it on Amazon. I'm also under Life Up Education TV across all social media platforms, pretty much, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Perfect. And with that said, I have to say a huge thank you for all the, I believe, value that you have brought, and for taking the time to want to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.